Good morning, students. Now, in our previous class, we have already discussed how to separate sand from water by the methods like sedimentation, filtration, etc. Now, in this case, the sand was insoluble in water. But what about those solids which are soluble in water, like salt? Now, how to separate salt from water? We cannot use the method of sedimentation or filtration in this case. What to do then? Well, before we think about it, let us have a look at this pic. Now, this is a glass of water and we keep it over a kitchen counter for an entire night. And we come and check it in the next morning. We will see that a very small amount of water is left behind in the glass. Now, where did the remaining water go? I'm quite sure the first word that must have clicked into your mind is evaporation. And you are pretty much correct. Evaporation takes place at room temperature, and the speed of evaporation or the rate of evaporation increases when we heat a certain liquid. Now, there are certain salts or compounds like salt, sugar, copper sulfate, which are soluble in water and can be extracted from their solution by the method of evaporation. Now, here is the setup of evaporation. Now, here salt solution is being heated in an evaporating dish. Now, when we heat this solution for a long period of time, the water will slowly start changing into its vapors. And when this process is continued for a long time, then in the end, the entire water has evaporated and the solid salt is left behind. Now, the major use of this technique of evaporation is in extraction of salt from seawater. The seawater is collected in shallow beds which are called as sea salt farms. Now, sea salt farms are huge farms, very much like the farms which we see in agriculture with small boundaries. Now, here the seawater is collected and is allowed to evaporate. When the entire water has evaporated, the salt is left behind, which is then collected for future use. Now, the evaporation technique cannot be applied to all the solids. Now, there are certain solids like ferrous sulfate. Now, ferrous sulfate are green colored crystals. Now, when we heat them, this one substance breaks up. The bonds between their atoms break down and it forms three substances, that is ferric oxide, sulfur dioxide and sulfur trioxide. Well, what to do in these cases? Well, these kind of solids are extracted by the method of crystallization. Now, crystallization is based on the slow evaporation of a solution and the kind of solution where the amount of solid is way more than the amount of liquid. In other words, we call it a supersaturated solution. To make it more clear, suppose you take a glass of water and you keep on adding salt in it, and until and unless the salt stops dissolving. And then you heat that solution and make it even more concentrated. That solution is known as supersaturated solution. So here is a setup for crystallization where we are heating a supersaturated salt solution in an evaporating dish. When we heat it for some time, the amount of water is reduced and we get a very concentrated salt solution. Now, at this stage, the heating is stopped and the container is then left undisturbed for a very long period of time and is allowed to cool slowly. When the solution is allowed to cool slowly, if we check out after some time, we will see that small fine crystals are formed at the base of the container. These crystals are then filtered out by the help of a filter paper and are dried over the filter paper. So today we have studied the two separation techniques for solid liquid mixture. The first is evaporation and second is crystallization.